man may not be on the top of his form, but he can still make himself useful.
Welcome back to the By Design Podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie Knuckles. So today we have a really cool episode. I've been looking forward to putting this out. Matthew Bradford is joining us today. Matthew is a Marine Corps veteran. I actually saw him when he was giving a speech to the Kentucky basketball team at Rupp Arena earlier this season. I saw him on the Kentucky Sports Radio page. I also saw him on the Kentucky Wildcats Facebook page, and saw that he was a Marine, and started, looked up his story and started to read a little bit about him, and thought it would be cool to have him on the show to share his story of resilience. And so I reached out to him, and thankfully he agreed to come on, and I thought that it would be a treat for our listeners to get to hear his story. Just a little bit about him. I don't want to take too much away from the show, but Matthew is a Kentucky veteran. He's from here originally. He served with 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines. He was stationed in Hawaii with them. He deployed to Iraq, and then on January 18th in 2007, he stepped in an IED in Haditha, Iraq. He lost his eyesight. Shrapnel got in both of his eyes. His left leg was severed, and his right leg was later amputated. He also suffered a broken hand. And so, as you can imagine, through that, there was a lot of struggles. And Matthew shares that story inside of this podcast. And he also shares how he overcame that. And he lives a fruitful life now, and he gives that glory to God. And, man, it was some of it was emotional for me to sit through and hear. But, man, what an incredible story of resilience and faith. And I think you all will be blessed for hearing it. So with all of that said, let's get into it. The first time that I heard about you was, I'm a big Kentucky basketball fan. And so I was hyped this season before the season, and I saw you had spoken with the team, and I'm like, who is this guy? Yeah. And, of course, I'm a Marine, and so I'm interested in, especially Marines from Kentucky. And so I had added you on Facebook, and I'm like, we had started to get the podcast going, and I'm like, I'm going to see if I can get this guy on the show. So, man, it's an honor to have you. I'm grateful that you allowed us, one, to come here and record with you. But
thank you so much. Yeah, that was definitely, like, I've spoken to the football team, the baseball team, but like the basketball team, I grew up a Kentucky basketball fan before anything, and that was a dream come true. Like I told Goose Givens, I was like, I felt like I was more nervous doing that than in a firefight overseas, But I joke about it now because when I spoke to the team, they haven't really played all that well since that speech. So I'm like, maybe I need to speak to the opponent. But I still have faith in this team. Like, I hate the first halves in the last few games. Like, it gives me a heart attack, and a lot of times I want to turn the games off. But like even Coach Pope said, is like, I'm not as worried when we're down at 18 at halftime going into the second half.
Yeah, I told my dad the other day, I'm like, I'm going to stop watching the first half and just start the second half because that's when they seem to get it together.
Oh, yeah.
They've been doing pretty good. I mean, I say pretty good. They've been pulling out some games the last few, so they can keep doing that.
Exactly. I just wish they'd put two halves together, but it's like, hey, I'd rather them start figuring it out now than figure it out. Like last year, I think they figured it out too early, and then the injuries kind of hurt them, but by the time they got to the tournament, it was just, I think they were just worn out.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we went, my sons, they're 8 and 9. They're big baseball guys. So one of them actually had their birthday at UK at the baseball game against Oklahoma this year, and they'd never gotten to go to Rupp for a basketball game. So we took them to see, I was like, look, tickets are cheap right now because they've been losing. So if we're going to do it, let's take them. And we went and saw Mississippi State, and they came back and won that game big, and that was fun. Yeah. So. Well, good, man. So I really wanted to bring you on to hear your story. So we have, you and I talked about this before, but we have a lot of businesses that we serve around the country, and many of them are veteran-owned. So as you know, a lot of veterans do their own thing when they get out. I think it's something that is bred into us over time. Maybe I don't know how to describe it, but a lot of business owners that I meet are veterans, and so when I saw your speech there and learned who you were and what your story is, I thought it would be awesome to have you come on and just share that story and what you're doing now, and add some value to our listeners and encourage them, hopefully, and just go from there, man. So let's back up. You told me you grew up a Kentucky basketball fan. Are you from here originally?
So my parents got divorced when I was very, very young. I mean, I don't even remember them being married, but I was born in Virginia. And when they got divorced, I was probably a year or two old. But all my family is from here in Central Kentucky. Even my dad's from Lewis County up north.
Oh, nice.
So he worked for the defense commissaries, and their headquarters were based out of Fort Lee. So that's where I was born. He worked, and then but I grew up in Winchester, Kentucky, all the way until right after my 9th grade year.
Gotcha. Yeah, the Lewis County is where Tyler Childers is from, right?
He's from somewhere over there.
Yeah, northeastern Kentucky, is that where it is?
Yep.
Yeah.
That was, being having divorced parents, like I spent a lot of time in Winchester during the school years, but summer times and holidays, I was either driving up to my, grandpa's farm in Vanceburg, and then, 64 over the mountains into Virginia. And it was, talking about the fandom of being a Kentucky fan, it's just, as my grandparents. That's, and I feel like I'm one of many stories in Kentucky, but, when I was with my grandparents, like, it was always Kentucky basketball, the game's on, like, nobody's outside, everybody's in front of the TV. And, when I think of basketball today, I think of my grandparents, and it's that love. And even now, or even then, traveling, being, different spots, I feel like being a fan just grows stronger and stronger, because you gotta represent a little bit more when you're the only one. And so it's but yeah, when I think of Kentucky basketball, I think of them.
Yeah, I think it's a Kentucky culture thing too, man. Because your story's similar to mine. My parents divorced when I don't even remember them ever being married. I think I was 1.5 or something. And then I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. They lived in Bullitt and Henry County, and my Henry County set, they were all from Eastern Kentucky and huge Kentucky basketball. We don't have pro sports, man, so it's like people are really invested in it, and so.
Yeah, I realized that when I lived in San Antonio, it was such a big city, and all they had was the Spurs, and they treated the Spurs like we treat Kentucky basketball here. And it's just, when it's game night, nobody's on the road, everybody's in front of the TV or at Rupp Arena. Yeah,
especially being where you're at, so close to Lexington. You know,
and it's like, I think, Malachi Moreno mentioned it when they beat LSU. He was like, as a kid in Kentucky, like, we all grow up in the backyard or in the front yard shooting basketball that 3, 2, 1 second to get that last second shot off. And that was my childhood, and
yeah, I told my wife, I'm like, what a dream that guy's getting to live right now.
My goodness.
There's a picture of him in the locker room when he was like 10 years old in the Kentucky jersey, and now he's hitting last second winning shots against LSU. And yeah,
then you got Trent Noah beating Tennessee last year, and it's just it's cool to see the Kentucky kids, because that's Kentucky basketball. Like, so.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate dream for a Kentucky kid, for sure. Yeah, so funny enough, real quick, I'll tell you this story. I was in Afghanistan. I didn't get to do a lot of convoys. We were stationary, and we already talked about that with the artillery unit. But we were moving to a location, and we were out in the middle of nowhere. We were coming through this like wadi, and there was an Afghan, and he had a UK hoodie on over his like robe, and I was hyped up, man. I was like, BBN, like, we're everywhere, you know what I mean? In the middle of Afghanistan. So some Marine had given him a UK hoodie at some point, and he was wearing it around town. I thought that was awesome. But,
that's the one thing, like, with traveling, not just in the United States, but South Africa, I think in Vietnam when I was there. Same thing. It's like, I think I was wearing a Kentucky shirt, and go Cats, or, it's like, wow. Like,
yeah, like they know.
Yeah, it's like all over the world, like you run into somebody.
Yeah, it's super interesting. So you grew up here, you grew up a Kentucky kid. You get a little bit older, and you and I have in common that we joined the Marine Corps at young ages. And I'm interested to hear, like, you and I, by the way, we had a long conversation before we started, but what'd that look like for you? How did you find the Marine Corps as a place where you wanted to land, coming up here?
So I never, somebody asked me this question if the military was ever in my line of sight before 9/11. And at that time, I didn't think twice about it. I was just your teenager. 9/11 happened when I was in ninth grade at George Rogers Clark High School in Winchester. And I remember that day that, okay, now I started looking more into the military. My dad worked on a military base, so every time I visited him in the summertime or the holidays, then I was around it. But, my life here started kind of like, I guess falling apart. My mom was starting to struggle with issues, and my brother was, 5-6 years older than I am. He, constantly had parties and drinking and drugs and stuff and all this stuff in the basement. And, like we mentioned a few minutes ago, I found myself outside with friends playing basketball, playing sports. But it was my mom getting thrown in jail my freshman year in high school that my granny stepped in and says, she called my dad and says, Matt needs to come live with you. Because at that time I didn't have any stability or structure. And I was also probably going down that path of, okay, what's next? Like military, I didn't know the recruiter here in Kentucky, but so my dad took me to live with him in Virginia, and I was so mad because I didn't want to move there. And those 3 years I lived in Virginia were the best 3 years of my life because it gave me that stability, that structure, and it also helped me look at the military as a really good option, a really good possibility for me. And having friends in high school that joined the delayed entry program in the Marine Corps or went off into the Army or the Air Force. So, in 2003-04, like everybody was joining the military. And shortly after 9/11, going back, like Black Hawk Down came out. Yep. That was my favorite movie. And seeing those those machine gunners on the helicopter, the Black Hawks, I'm like, man, I want to do that. That sounds cool. And then I remember my junior year, I had to do a project, and it was like, what do you want to do after you graduate high school? And I think I had one of the U.S. Army recruiting things, and I posted that on there. And at this time, I didn't even think about the Marine Corps. And then I had two buddies that were already in the delayed entry program. They were going off to recruit training right after they graduated, and started hanging out with them more and starting going through the delayed entry program, the pulley functions, and meeting with the recruiter. And December of my senior year in high school, I was already 18 years old, and I went through the MEPS, signed up, come home, and I had that tough conversation with my dad in my bedroom because I had all these military times, posters of like military bases, Marine Corps posters, and
you had to know it was coming, man.
He did, and this is when I did the MEPS was probably a week or two after the Battle of Fallujah, the second battle, and he looked at me and says, "You know what infantry does?" And I did, and I was I didn't know what to expect, but it's just those conversations looking back that, man, like my dad, he loved me to death, and he always wanted me to live my life and do the right thing. But even decisions that he didn't like, he never showed it because he always supported everything that I did. And in December of 2004, I knew what I wanted to do. All I had to do was graduate high school, give the recruiter my diploma. The date that I was going to recruit training was September 6th of 2005, and I didn't understand the whole true brotherhood of the Marine Corps, the love of the Marine Corps, being a Marine, until later on. But I was excited. Like, I was like, this, I know what's next. I didn't, 3 years earlier in Kentucky, I don't know if I'd ever had that opportunity. I don't even know if I'd graduated high school, but, my dad gave me that stability and that structure, and also gave me the, he put me out there, like, if you want to, if you want to do this, then it's on you, and I want to do what I can to support you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome, man. I know that. I think there's some commonality amongst Marines, and one thing is that, like, regardless of MOS, like, what you're doing. You know that if there is going to be, and especially in our cases, like, there was already something going on. We knew what we were getting into, but even if there isn't, like now, if something does pop off, you're going to be one of the first ones to get into that. And I think that the brotherhood is built around that, and knowing that.
And that's the one thing, like, my dad was in the Air Force, so he, out of respect to him, like, I met with a recruiter, but I was looking at, like, special forces, combat controllers, but that pipeline was almost 2 years long, and I'm like, I didn't want to miss the war. Like
Yeah.
I wanted to go get those guys who were responsible for 9/11. Like I wanted to go to combat. I wanted to fight, and that's what really made me sway into infantry, because I knew Marine Corps units were going over, and I felt like even at the age of 18, this country was so good to me, and the freedoms that we have. Like I respected, I loved it, everything that flag stood for, and I wanted to go represent that, and I wanted to go, honor that flag and get those who were responsible for that day. And still today, I'm just as patriotic as I was then, but it's just fighting a different battle now.
Yeah. I mean, and you're serving in a different way, and I think that that was it was an issue for me when I went to boot camp. You said you went in September 6th?
2005.
Yeah. I went exactly almost 4 years to the day. I think I went in September 4th, 2009. So was that 4 years? 5 years. 5 years to the day. And that was a fear of mine, because I'm like, this war started when I was like 11 years old, and it's been going now. It went on for like another 10 years after that, or 11 years after that. But I was like, dude, I'm not even going to get to be involved in this. And my childhood was watching Fallujah, watching Baghdad on TV, like seeing all of this happen, and I wanted to be involved in that because I grew up in a patriotic family as well. And so that's a common story, I think across a lot of people's lives, and
especially if you think about Kentucky and for me in Virginia, but we're all country folk here.
Yeah.
We love our country. Not saying nobody else does, but a lot of us go into the military. And my grandparents, both my grandpas served, my dad served, my uncle served. My older cousin on my dad's side was in the Army. So it's like all that military was around me, and I didn't realize it until 9/11 that that's what I wanted to do. And then once I got into it, my recruiter was on the march up to Baghdad as a Marine, skipping ahead a little bit, but at recruit training, my two drill instructors were Purple Heart recipients at the First Battle of Fallujah. So it's like all that combat was around me. And again, just we knew we were going to war. And it's just, they were constantly reminded us over and over again, they never let us forget, like, hey, you better get your stuff together now, because and within a year or whatever, like, you're going to be overseas.
Yeah.
And so it was just that, I mean, the platoons that we had were 70 strong. There were just so many of us. And like I told you earlier, just a lot of those guys, and one of them in particular, and I'll share his name a few times, but I knew him in MEPS, like even before the Yellow Footprints. We were in the same recruit training. We were in SOI together, and then I was in 2nd platoon, and then he was in 3rd platoon once we were deployed. And it's just that bond of friendship and brotherhood, and still today, it's like that's over 20 years of just someone who I love and respect so much, because he played a huge part in something that happened to me later on in my life, that we'll share. But it's just, all those guys that I served with and went off to war with, it's just not only the transition from recruit training to SOI to 2nd Battalion 3rd Marines in Hawaii, but, majority of those guys would go off to war with me.
Yeah. I mean, I've been out for 13 years, and I talked to at least one guy. I mean, I'm in a group chat on Facebook with a bunch of them. They're still idiots like we were back then, but I talked to at least one guy directly every week. And, I mean, the bonds that you make in there are, it's just something you don't get anywhere else. And it's something like for me, I've got young boys, and in today's culture, I think like they're not coming up in a world where there is a war going on, an active war where America is losing people regularly. And not that the sense of patriotism is gone, but I do think that in our world, it was very in our face. Like we knew what it meant to defend the United States, and we heard about it regularly. And I don't want them to grow up and the military is looked at as kind of like this, that's the last resort. For me, it was, but I think it's a worthy cause. And I think it has set my life up, which really wasn't even my intention when I went in, but it has set me up in a much better position than I would have been otherwise, because like you, I probably would have went down a very bad path without it.
Exactly. And even today, I'm always like, if you don't have scholarship to go to college or a blue collar school, it's like the military is a good option. You know, and like you said, it sets you up 4 years or 20, however long you want to serve. It's just, you get in there and, I mean, you get your training for whatever job you have, but you get the education, you get the health care, and you get the importance of leadership.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just that leadership is so important in the real world. Just like you said earlier about, look at all these veterans that are owning businesses, who are out there doing podcasts, who, you know, it's like they're taking what they learned in the military and they're striving.
Yeah, you learn something about yourself. You know, there's some kind of, I think being around people from all different walks of life, it forces you to be introspective. You know what I mean? Like you have, there's something you have to learn particular things about yourself to survive and thrive. And then when you get out, you're able to take that to the world and create because of that, you know, create businesses and podcasts like you were saying,
I mean,
because of what you learned.
You know, and again, looking back on my life, like I didn't realize the importance of the things I've learned as a Marine, even though it was a short time as an active duty before I got injured, but like those qualities helped keep me alive. And it was just that understanding that we're going to face a battle every day. You know, it's just, sometimes it might not be insurgents. Nowadays it's the demons in our head, but we're constantly fighting those battles every day in life. And, you know, we could just lay down and quit, or we can get up and keep fighting, because, you know, they're going to keep punching you over and over again until you start punching back. And I've learned through life that, like, you're a strong person, but you know what? You're a lot stronger when you got like-minded individuals to your left and to your right that you trust, that will fight that battle with you.
My cousin in Eastern Kentucky used to say, you might whoop me, but you won't whoop we.
Exactly.
So let's fast forward a little bit, man. So you get out of boot camp. You joined the infantry, and you had told me that you were with 3-1? 3-2. 2-3. I'm sorry, 3rd Marines. So walk me through what that journey looked like. You know, you pre-deployment, during the deployment. Yeah, you know, I'd love to hear that side of the story.
Yeah, so like I told you earlier, like we were, you know, finished up School of Infantry in North Carolina, and you kind of hear the rumor mill, like, oh, there's a select few of you all going off to Hawaii, but the majority of y'all are going to be in Lejeune, just because we're East Coast Marines. And it happened to be like all of our 0311s and the next company behind us all went to Hawaii. And, you know, being in North Carolina, it's cold in March. So here I am in a hoodie and pants, and I'm going to Hawaii, and it's like I get off the airplane, I sweat to death. But like here I am thinking, I'm like, wow, this is, because I joined the Marine Corps, like I knew that I was more than likely going to be at Lejeune, but I didn't want to be at Lejeune. Like I wanted to go out and not to say I wanted to see the world, but I actually wanted to go somewhere different. And being stationed in Hawaii, I'm like, wow, here we go. You know, and again, being with a bunch of guys that I know made it so much easier. And getting there, and you know, by this time 2-3 just got back from Afghanistan, so they're already starting to work up. You know, and that's just how the rotation was back then. It was 7 months on, 7 months off. Now, you know, you keep going. Yep. And so at that time, we didn't know, you know, they got back from Afghanistan. We didn't know where we were going next, but it's like, all right, we're going to a workup. We're going to go train. And it was, you know, rough at first, because it's like you're trying to trust these new guys, but you're also trying to do what you're supposed to do and not get in trouble and do it the right way. And because, you know, not only they're trying to earn your trust, you're trying to earn their trust. And, you know, but the more we push forward, you know, you start to get to know each other, and you start knowing your job, and you start doing it the right way. And, you know, it's just constant training, physical therapy, or physical training. It was just go, 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 go. And, you know, June and July, we were at CAX in North California. And by that time, we kind of started knowing we're going to Iraq.
That was at 29 Palms?
Yeah. And that's kind of when, you know, our company did, you know, a phenomenal job through the training fields, and that's kind of when I think our company commander was told that, hey, you're going to be the main element going into Iraq. You know, and again, we didn't know where, but again, that was way above my pay grade. But, you know, we did a good job there, came back, and, you know, by that time it was off to pre-deployment leave. And, you know, but through it all, like we mentioned earlier, it's like our seniors were like, you know, hey, like we never know, like we could pack up tonight and be overseas right, you know, the next day. So, but I wanted to deploy. I wanted to go fight. And even like on a pre-deployment leave, when I went home to Virginia and just around some friends, it felt different. Like my life has already changed just being a Marine and going through this training and knowing that, what's next is a deployment to where I might not come home from that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was okay with it. Like I don't want to ever sit there and say that, oh, I knew something bad was going to happen to me. Like, I was trained up that I was ready to go to war.
Yeah.
Like, I felt so good that, and, we all know it. You train, you clear rooms, you do it the right way, but you really never know how trained you are until, excuse my language, when shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
And that's what we all got the first few days when we got to Iraq. And so, coming back from pre-deployment leave, and it was basically pack up, and then we're on a plane. Literally a year after I joined the Marine Corps,
Mm-hmm.
I'm on a plane headed to Kuwait. And then from Kuwait, we went on into Al-Assad, Iraq, and then, this is kind of like when we first start getting the rumor, the real stuff, because it's not coming from our company commander, it's not coming from our seniors or what they hear. This is coming from a guy that's actually been where we're going.
Mm.
And he told us that, he's like, I feel bad for what you all are about to go do, and me being a B, Bradford, like I'm one of the first ones on the bird going into Aditha in the middle of the night, and standing on top of that dam, just looking out over, and you see this, like, middle of the night, you see these little lights, and he's like, this is where we're going, and convoys going into Haditha, dropping off Marines from Echo Company, and getting into firefights. Like, it hit us from the start.
Yeah.
And so it's, as I mentioned earlier, like the first 40 days, our company averaged a casualty a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people, because it's like, it's always on the forefront of your mind. Like, when you leave the briefing room to go on patrol, the last thing you see is to the left of the door that you exit, and that's the casualty report on the guys that were injured. And then as you step out one of the gates to the, going into the town, like off to the left was an unexploded ordnance that's stuck in the ground that never exploded. So it's like, this stuff's all around you. And
Yeah.
the firefights, the mortars every day. Our fob was right in the middle of town. And it's just, I think you get to a point in life where you're like, I don't know if we're ever going to make it out of here alive.
Mm.
I mean, you constantly go on patrol, and you never know if you're going to make it back, your brother's going to make it back. You come back and you hear about casualty reports, you hear about your best friend, and it's just, but being Marines, like, we go and do our job.
Yeah.
And, the first 3 months of that deployment was just, it was fast paced, but it was just, you had no time to reflect on emotions. You just kept doing your job and understanding that, like, what you're doing is going to work. Just got to keep pushing forward and keep fighting on, because, and that's what we did. It was tough at first, but again, I wasn't afraid to die. I just wanted to go out and do what I needed to do, and make sure we all come back alive.
Yeah, I mean, I know that that's an interesting world that you live in on deployment, and how one person can be deployed and be experiencing a totally different Iraq than you, or a totally different war than you, because my war in Afghanistan didn't look like that. Of course, I was a radio operator, which I told you before, and so we were in the rear. And so our war looked like, troops in contact. So you guys, just as an example, we worked with infantry units all the time. They would be pushing into a town, they'd find a building they were getting gunfire from, and they would give me the coordinates, or they'd give the FO the coordinates, and he would relay them to me, and we would level the building. But my war looked, when I was watching, we were in like a combat situation, I'm watching it on a drone. Mm-hmm. So I can see our Marines, and then I can see where the building they're taking fire from. And meanwhile, you're the guy on the ground, right? You're the guy that's getting that gunfire from that building. And I don't know why, but just as you were telling that story, it struck me how all of these different people and units and roles are all experiencing war in a different way, And
that could definitely relate to what you talk about later in life, just how we all experience things differently.
Yeah.
We all deal with our own issues, and it actually carried the radio a few times when I was in Iraq, and I hated that thing so much. And it was the big one too. And the gunny that I had to follow around was this high energy, running all over the place.
Oh,
and
Lord.
I remember one time, me and one of my seniors, like, I think this was like the fourth day, the final day of us on patrol with this gunny, and me being the radio guy, like, him and I just sitting on this rock pile in the middle of the street was just like, not worried about any snipers, not worried about anything just happening to us. It's just like, good grief, are we ever going to get out of here? And
Yeah.
The first time we got in a firefight, actually, too, kind of good old comms went out on us.
That's how it goes, man. It always seems to do that at the right time.
We had to pop the flare up and stuff, and just sit in a rooftop and wait till somebody picked us up, or hopefully a radio ended up working. But it's something, and it's like, to me, that felt normal when we were over there. It just and I always wondered too, because like drill instructors put us through such chaotic times in boot camp that, like, what sense did any of this make? And then people always ask me, like, when you're in a firefight, like, how does it actually happen? And to me, it just slowed down so much, and you have time to think about, what do I need to do first? What do I need to do next? And it's not like how a lot of the movies make it out, to where it's just so much going on. It's just, to me, it just slowed it down, and kind of just got to assess the situation, know what you need to do, and kind of find cover and know where the enemy's shooting at and shoot back, or try to find ways to flank them and take them out.
Yeah, I think the Marine Corps does a good job of, even, I didn't go to SOI. I went to combat training in North Carolina, and even, for the, whatever it was, 5 weeks I was there, whatever, there were certain situations where they do a good job of fabricating chaos. Mm-hmm. I think so that when it does happen, you don't freak out, like and it isn't some crazy situation that you don't know how to function in, But like you said, you never really know until it happens. You never really know how your brain is going to react to that until it pops off. But
I remember the first patrol we went on, and this was kind of like, we knew our squads, but this was kind of a mixed squad, and we didn't see any firefights, but it was middle of the night patrol. We just kind of circled the block and went back, just kind of like understand where we're going, what we're doing. And one of our seniors at the time just like laid into us all, like, you did this wrong, you did all this wrong. And then, kind of a rough start to a deployment. Mm-hmm. And then, we go back to our rooms, and one of my seniors, who was actually in my squad, looked at me and a couple of other Marines and was like, don't listen to him. Like, we'll be fine. Like, he's not in our squad. He's, we'll figure this out on our own, and we'll figure, and I will say, like, second squad, my squad, like, we got in probably the most firefights in the whole deployment, and until my injury and where my team leader was hurt, like, we came home with the same amount of Marines. Like, for some reason, I don't know what it was, every time we went out, we ended up getting shot at. And it's just, but we figured out our own way. I was a point man, and we figured out how to do it and what we needed to do, and we got the job done. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Now, let me ask you this. You had mentioned Jocko earlier, and I don't know which book it was in. He talks about a lot of different combat scenarios. But when you were talking about Haditha, and you guys are on this dam, and you're looking over, and you're seeing lights moving throughout the city and stuff, there was some, it might have been Leif. Is it Leif or Leif?
I call him Leif.
Yeah, Leif. Yeah, I think it's Leif. I think maybe he was the one narrating this particular part of the book. But, the SEALs were deployed in conjunction with the Marines a lot. Mm-hmm. Did you have any experience with them while you guys were over there? Did they support you guys at all?
No, we were just our company. That was it. We were just the battalion of Marines that were spread out through, us being the main element, which was in Haditha, was Echo Company, and then Gulf was in Hawklania, and then Barwana was Fox Company, and that's just, I think maybe we had one Army guy, which was PsyOps, that stayed with us, but we were just, we rolled on our own.
Yeah, well, that happens to Marines a lot, I think.
Yeah.
But he was talking about Marines in the book, and I'm like, I wonder if we never had any. We had one interaction with MARSOC where they had targeted an IED facility, but outside of that, we didn't have really any interaction with special operations units.
We were getting hit so hard, and we were losing the guys to being injured and killed. But so we had Fox Company. They weren't as hit as we were, so they brought over, I think, a platoon of Marines and stayed with us for a little bit, and then. I think it's somebody from 4th Marines that was on a MEU. They brought them up, and their snipers actually rolled up on an IED in the middle of the night, and it sadly took a bunch of them. But I remember being on post that night. You hear that explosion not far from our FOB. I mean, it lit the sky up, and so the guys that were going to relieve us on post, and then our QRF, like, all went out there to kind of just battle that, BDA, battle damage assessment and stuff like that, and check it all out. But so we had a couple squads, platoons, and units come up and kind of help us out for a short amount of time. But it was just, Echo Company, we just kind of did what we needed to do. And we had a strong company commander who's now a 1-star that just kept pushing us. And on that deployment, he's a very humble individual, but he actually received the Lethbridge Award for his amount of leadership in our work in Haditha, because what we dealt with the first 3 months, the unit that relieved us didn't take any casualties. So
yeah, that's awesome.
We pushed through and we kept doing what we need to do, because again, it's like, as long as we're doing what we need to do, like, it's going to work itself out in the end. And thankfully, like, you start seeing the people, the indigenous people, the natives that, who were scared to talk with us at first, start coming out their door, start shopping in the market, start being more around the Marines, and because they trusted us, and the insurgency like started moving on, because we were doing what Marines do. We were kicking their butts. So.
Right. Yeah, and there is always that, like, okay, we got these Marines in here who are, our reputation is what it is. And so I can imagine those people had some fear in them about, like, oh, we can't even be out of our homes, dealing with around these guys. But the mission was not to mess with the civilian populace. It was actually trying to give them their lives back.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. And
we were hit hard with, of course, the IEDs, but the snipers really got us. And it's interesting because, like, if you remember the DC sniper and how he would shoot out the tail light and then take off. Yeah. And that's kind of, so when we finally captured and killed these 2 individuals, saw his car, they shot at us the same way. They would roll up to the end of a block. They would kind of back the car up a little bit. And then if you're, guarding that danger zone, because they always taught us to bob around, move around, never stay in one spot. But if you're staying in one spot, like, they could sight in on you. And one of the guys in our squad actually, I was point man, but you could hear, like, once he got shot, it smacked him right in the Kevlar. And thankfully the Kevlar stopped it. But, they'd roll up, back up, shoot out the tail light. And again, when we finally captured them, they were shooting us with our own weapon.
Man.
M16 with an ACOG.
Dang.
And, but yeah, so once we finally taken care of those individuals, like, that kind of stopped. But I mean, he took out a few Marines in our company.
Yeah. That's just it's a wild situation. That war in particular was and in both countries, Iraq and Afghanistan, the way that it was fought, I think, was unique in that the wars hadn't been fought that way against an ununiformed force in a long time, at least at that scale. And
that's one thing too. It's like, people talk about the Iraq War and was it really worth it? But it's like, it's hard to say that it wasn't when you lose so many people. It's like, I lost so many friends over there, and of course I lost, what I lost. But it's like, I can't sit there and say that this war wasn't worth it. And
yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the world now, the world is much different than it was before we went over there and did what needed to be done. I think, Afghanistan, one of the things I struggled with was, for a while, especially during when they were doing the drawdown, a lot of the areas that we were in and that a lot of Marines had died for were immediately taken over, like right away. And but I still think if you look at, a lot of lives were saved. So are you okay with obviously talking about, what happened in your deployment?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So walk me through that. Was that on your first or your second deployment?
It was on my first deployment.
Okay.
And, so, kind of leading up to that point too, probably in December, my team leader had to step away to go to Al-Assad for a few days. And, on this option, we had on these, on the upcoming patrol, they was like, all right, Bradford, you're the team leader, you're point man. We're going to keep you up there. You've been doing this job, so you're good at it. And by this, like, we've kind of we've battled through the first 3 months of our deployment. And it's starting to ease down a little bit, but having that trust in the squad leader to put it in on me, and it kind of gave me that sense of, like, being like, wow, this is what I wanted to do, and this is, like, I wanted to make a career out of the Marine Corps and deploy, and now I'm, like, finally in a place to where I'm leading Marines. Not only are they trusting me, I got to take the right roads, I got to take the right houses when we go in, and I'm their point man.
Mm-hmm.
And my squad leader told me, it's like, Matt, we trust you. And that point forward, I was like, wow, like this is what I wanted to do. And, my team leader came back and just, finally earning like the full trust, I think, like from everyone, but especially him, because I looked up to him a lot. And, I was like, well, now I'm ready to go home, ready to go back to Hawaii, get my own group of Marines, take them to combat and bring them home alive, train these guys up.
Mm-hmm.
I was ready for that position. It's kind of like the next man up mentality. I was put in that position and I did good. But, within, probably about a month later, we were getting ready to go on a patrol. It was about 3:30 in the afternoon in Iraq time. And, I got a chance to call home. We had satellite phones, and I called my uncle. And at this time, we were starting to hear the rumors of the next unit coming in to relieve us, the advance party. And so I'm excited about it. And then, again, just being that team leader and having that position. And, we go off to brief, and we go on patrol. And being a point man, I was on the right side of the road. My team leader was on the left side of the road. And we take this right turn on this road called Park Place that laid parallel to the Euphrates River. I mean, literally from the left side of the road, maybe 30 yards to the river. We were that close. But it was in the section called the Palm Groves. And, the section called the Palm Groves is where we got into a lot of firefights. And, as we're walking past this compound wall, I kind of look out off to my right and leaned up against the tree. This white bag. And that's a suspicious item. That's where they marked a lot of, weapons and, IED emplacements. And so I turn around and let my team leader know to the left to be on alert, to the Marines behind me. And, hearing from friends today, they said the last thing that we heard from you before the explosion was be on alert. Watch out, this white bag up here. And, it's leaned up against a tree. It's weird. And as I turn back around, as I'm getting ready to step off into the road, into this, little, grassy, ditchy area outside, and there's this ditch that went right along the compound wall inside of a pipe underneath the road. And I was basically standing right on top of it. And as I looked down, I saw the command wires going inside that ditch, or inside that pipe.
Oh, man.
I mean, by that time, there was no running. There was no getting away from it. As I looked down, it exploded directly underneath me, sent shrapnel into both my eyes. Like, my life went from light to dark in the matter of seconds. And, still in and out of consciousness, I could hear what's going on around me. My squad leader calling in for QRF. I could kind of tell that he was hovering over me, but again, just kind of going in and out of it. And I kind of got this part figured out within the last few years, because in my mind I thought it didn't happen this way. But I had as they were waiting for QRF, and I was in a compound on the stretcher and all this stuff, tourniquets put on my legs, and one of the Marines that was with me, one of my closest friends, was just sitting there holding my hand. Because as I mentioned earlier, we got into a lot of firefights, a lot of engagements, but we always came back alive. All 12 of us, or 13, except now. And so, looking at me in this position, my head looked weird. My eyes were all over the place. My legs were gone, and they didn't know how much longer I was going to make it. And then, of course, QRF got there. They brought me back to Haditha, the battalion aid station, which, our aid station was the size of a closet.
Yeah.
They needed a lot more people in there to take care of my injuries. So they cleared out the chow hall, put tables together, put me up on the litter, or put me up on the table, and started putting fluids in me, doing what they can to kind of stabilize me for the flight to Balad. But and going back, my senior drill instructor, all the way back to recruit training, right before I graduated, he looked at us and was like, once I'm done with you, cuss word, then I'm off to Hawaii and you'll never see me again. I got one more cycle. And being an East Coast Marine, you just kind of figure you're going to be on the East Coast. So we find out we're going to go to Hawaii. We kind of forget about him a little bit saying this stuff. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, he shows up in Hawaii. And I happen to be the last recruit to actually walk up and say, hey, how are you doing? And so my platoon sergeant was best friends with him. They both left the drill field together. And he was like, Bradford, you ain't said hi to him. He knows. He's going to kill you. I'm like, well, great. You're in the fleet. You think you're done with this stuff by now. And as I'm walking to the company office, he's walking directly in front of me about 30 yards. And I'm like, oh, gosh, I got to say something now. And I'm like, good afternoon, gentlemen, because it's him and another staff sergeant. And I keep walking thinking, oh, yes. And he's like, hey, Bradford, you don't remember me, do you? I'm like, I do. And he was like, good, and... But But from that point forward, he was a really good guy, you
Yeah.
know, and so he was the platoon sergeant of QRF the day in Iraq. And he was in the chow hall as I'm up on the tables, and they're like fixing the tourniquets and stabilizing me and stuff like that. And they're like, hey, just talk to him. Get as close to his ear, like a familiar voice. And as I hear him say, "You'll be fine, Bradford," it's the last words that I've ever heard until I passed out. And I didn't hear anything else until 3 weeks later when I woke up from the coma in Bethesda. And, I originally thought that's when they put me on the Black Hawk. And he said those words, "You'll be fine, Bradford." And
Oh, you thought he was on the bird with you?
I thought he carried me on the bird. But, as I mentioned my friend earlier, Kevin Ayala, who was in MEPS with me, the boot camp and all this stuff, he was in QRF as well. And he was one of the Marines that actually carried me on that Black Hawk. So it's just, thinking about this person, the stranger I met at Fort Lee MEPS. We go through all these training and schools together, and he's the one that put me on that Black Hawk to get me out of there.
That is wild.
And it's just, you talk about small world, Marine Corps, and still today that guy is my best friend, you know. But I woke up from that coma 3 weeks later, and at that time my phantom pains were so severe, I felt like I had feet. And I had to get on to my dad for this, because he would always whisper to the doctor behind me, and I hear these people whispering, and I'm thinking, not knowing that I'm in a hospital, not knowing that I lost my legs or any of this stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, I was captured.
Oh, yeah, you're completely blind as well.
I thought I was blindfolded. The phantom pains are so severe, and I'm like, Dad, you got to quit whispering. And then, finally, he let me know that I lost my legs. And I remember just sitting there crying. I wanted to come home either alive or not come home at all. Definitely didn't want to come home wounded. I was 20 years old. Not like I was the best high school student. I was focused on joining the Marines. I didn't know what this life would even hold for me. I didn't even know what was even out there. Am I going to be in a hospital for the rest of my life? Am I going to be in a wheelchair? I'm blind with no legs. I didn't really care too much for the eyesight. I just wanted my legs back. You read these news stories of the wounded and coming home from war, losing their legs. I didn't think that would happen to me. I had my mind set on coming home, being that leader, taking Marines over to combat and bringing them home alive. And I finally figured out my life, and I finally had stability. I had structure, and I enjoyed every minute of being a Marine. And then all of a sudden, in the second, that carpet was just pulled from underneath me. And now here I am trying to wake up to try to figure out my own life again. And so I was devastated. I was destroyed. I didn't want to live life anymore. If that ID didn't take me out, then I'm going to try to find out how to do it myself. So I did my best with starving myself in a hospital. I was so skinny, it was hard for me to lift my head up off the bed. The hospital band that they put on my left arm would go all the way up to my armpit.
Yeah.
I was in that condition, and thankfully it's good and bad, but we had a lot of guys that got wounded, and there were two of them in particular that was in Bethesda when I got there. And when they found out there was another Echo Company Marine in the hospital, one lost a leg, the other one was shot in the head. They in their own therapy found time to come see me over and over again. And for me, trying to figure out who I could trust, I trusted those two. I didn't know them. I knew their names. I knew their stories. I knew what happened to them. But it's not like I could sit here and give them the same attitude that I'm giving everyone else. But the one Marine who lost his leg, me trying to figure out what's next, will I ever walk again? He let me know that, it's going to be a journey. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to, good times and bad times, you're going to want to quit. It's not going to be easy. But as he walked in there on his prosthetic, he got injured 2 months earlier, but he's up moving around. But I kept having all these people come to my hospital room, friends, not friends. They kept coming in even though I didn't want them in there.
Yeah. And
I realized then that, once I got out of that dark spot, that I'm not fighting insurgents no more. I'm fighting these new demons, these new battles in life. And, during this time, music played a huge part. My dad would put, my what are those little things called? I like little iPod. You have a
Yeah,
little iPod.
iPods were big, yeah. In '05.
Like he had music playing for me, and Lone Star Mountains. That song came out. Like actually, the 3 songs that came out that I remember the most was Tim McGraw, The Last Dollar, Keith Urban, Stupid Boys, and then Mountains by Lone Star. You know, there's some times in life when God will, you know, that's why God gave you mountains so you can learn how to climb. And I just heard the lyrics of that song, and I'm like, wow. Like, you know, the second part of that song, talking about an Army private who lost his leg. He wanted to run in that marathon and train through the endless pain and pills. Sometimes he just had to cry, but he crossed that finish line. And all of this stuff around me, and to me at that time, like, I just had this in my head that, man, why can't, maybe this is my purpose in life. You know, maybe this is why God redirected me down this path. I want to stay in the Marine Corps. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to walk in hospital rooms, and because I've learned more in life, and even then probably, because a lot of the guys that were talking to me were wounded. Those are the people that I'm going to take more trust in their words, because they've been there, they've done that, they've dealt with the injuries. I could be that person in someone else's life. Life isn't over because you deal with stuff. You know, you might have to fight a little harder. You might have to just embrace it a little bit more. But life isn't over, you know, and you know, God gave me the second chance to live life. And my ultimate goal was to re-enlist in the Marine Corps, to wear the uniform. I knew there was programs out there that the Marine Corps just founded. And I, you know, met the guy that lost both his hands. That was the first amputee. So it's out there. Now it's on me to go to work. I needed to get strong. I needed to get out of that hospital bed. I needed to learn how to walk. I needed to learn how to play, you know, go through the blind school and figure that stuff out. But ultimately, like, I just needed to forget the negativity. You know, I was in Maine a couple of weeks ago, and I heard the statistic for the first time that, you know, 80% of our thoughts are negative thoughts, which is like a high number.
Yeah.
But I realized that once I started thinking positively, once I started moving in the right direction, because I had that goal on what I wanted to do, I started getting off medications. I started getting a little stronger. I started getting more food in my body. And before I knew it, I was going from that hospital bed to a wheelchair. I actually got to take my first lap around the hospital right before I left Bethesda. And before I know it, basically a month and a half later, after I get out of that coma, I'm in an ambulance headed to the next hospital. I was there for 2 months in Richmond, Virginia. And it's just putting my mind in the right direction, focusing on what I need to do, doing it positively, you know, not letting people tell me how they want me to live my life, but why let me live my own life, my way. My way or the highway. That's how I looked at it, you know. So I was in Richmond, Virginia, you know, and always had these stories in my head, you know, from things that happened to me. You know, when I was, you know, I was still getting out of the hospital bed. I was in a wheelchair, but I still had bad days, you know, and 3 months after my injuries, I'm still trying to figure this stuff out. But every time I left the hospital room, I had a blanket. I had a poncho liner, actually, you know.
I still got one.
Yeah, I do too.
Hey, those things are sweet.
Yep. And I use that as a security blanket. Because I thought that poncho liner would cover up my amputations so nobody could see that I didn't have legs. But, you know, still I was exiting the room. I was around other people. And I slowly realized that, man, like, why be disappointed, discouraged on what happened? Like, these amputations is who I am. Like, I always tell people, unless there's some miracle juice out there, these legs aren't growing back, you know? So, but no, don't be ashamed of it.
Yeah.
You know, so I slowly started taking that poncho liner off my lap. I started getting out of my room. I started being around people, and I was okay with what happened to me. You know, not letting one bad day turn into 2 bad days. Learn from that bad day to make the next day better than the last day. Because what I'm doing right now is strengthening me and lessons that I'm learning to better me for tomorrow. And that's what I focused on. The next story that I remember, my doctor, he would come in my hospital room every day. Every afternoon, he had I think a 3 and a 5-year-old at home. Like, there's reasons he could have went home. But he was in my room 4:30 every afternoon. And when he'd come in there, he would either close his eyes or he'd put a blindfold on. He says, "Matt, you can't see me, so I can't see you." It's like he took his title off. And
Is a Navy doctor?
no, just a civilian.
Civilian doctor.
You know, but working with at the polytrauma there in Richmond, Virginia. And he put himself as best as he could in my shoes. And that gave me so much trust just to talk to him. You know, because I'm sure we all talk to people that, like, here we are having, conversations, and they're looking down at their phone or they're looking in another direction. They got so much on their mind, but he put himself in that moment with me. And I just had the ultimate respect for him for that. The last story, she was my speech therapist, and she came into my hospital room the first day. I'm like, look, I'm from Kentucky. Like, I know how to trach, I have a severe TBI and all this stuff, but this is how I talk. Like,
she's trying to correct your accent.
Yeah, she's like, I'm like, I don't want to spend.
He got blown up and turned Appalachian all of a sudden.
Yeah, really. Like, I don't want to spend the next 2 months, reading the sentence on how the brown fox jumped over the log. Like, this is not what I want to do. Like, I want to, like, to me, I'm like, I'm focused on getting better. Mm-hmm. The next day, she came in with my blind rehab outpatient specialist. We call them bros, and I'm like, gosh, what? Like, now I got to argue with two people here, and he was like, she wants to teach you Braille. I'm like, all right, so. April of 2007, I'm starting to learn Braille, but we would joke around, we would laugh, we'd have a good time the Monday through Friday, sometimes on Saturday when they had to come into work. And I found this out right when I'm leaving Richmond, Virginia to head to San Antonio, that just before she saw me, she had a miscarriage. And here I am dealing with my stuff, she's dealing with her stuff. We never talked about it, but you know what? For those days that we were together, it just we put our mind in a good spot. And I was at Chicago Airport, I don't know, a few years ago. And as we're getting off the bus, the lady that was driving the shuttle was like, hey, whatever you do in life, just be kind and compassionate to others, because you never know what someone else is dealing with. And I just had that flashback to 2007 that I didn't know what she was dealing with. But I realized that we all deal with different issues. Sometimes we might not openly express it, but we're all dealing with something. Walking in and treating somebody horrible, or giving them attitude when they don't deserve it, because there was a lot of people at this time that would walk into my life, and I treated them this way. And it's just like, kindness isn't hard. Mm-hmm. I grew up here in Kentucky. Those are core values that was taught to me, to hold the door open, to be kind to others, to be respectful to others, and it's just another story and another person that came into my life to provide that wisdom to me. And when I was at Richmond, Virginia, I'd always go into the community room. There's a fish tank in there, and I would just lay on the couch, and I would just lay there and just listen to the water flow, and I'm like, it was peaceful, it was tranquil to me. And I realized then that, like, just the same thing that my buddy told me 3 months earlier, that I could live this life. It is going to be difficult. It's going to be tough. I'm going to quit. I'm going to give up. But you know what? As long as I continue to put one foot in front of the next, and pushing on, I will walk. I will, succeed from this life. And every day's a battle. It all depends on how we, wake up from that battle, or how we push forward through that battle. The choice is ours. We could lay there and quit and give up, or we could just stand up and rise. Mm-hmm. And, early on in that recovery, coming out of the dark spot, I realized that I had two paths. One is self-pity, poor me, alcohol, drugs, suicide. The other one was go out and live life to the fullest, live a normal life, live a human-like life, because that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want my amputations, I didn't want my blindness to be a weakness, something that would restrict me from living life. That's just a daily motivation. When I put these amputations on, I'm going to remember why I got my legs blown off, why I had shrapnel go through my eyes. Never let that insurgent who pushed that button win. Mm-hmm. And me waking up every day and going out and just fighting to live life, to love life, to live it to the fullest, is me defeating him every day. And that's the way I live life.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I had heard bits and pieces of the story from, following you on social media, and I'd listened to what you had told the Kentucky basketball players, and of course I know you probably held back a little bit on telling college students the whole story, but no, I appreciate that. I think, a lot of it is playing the cards you've been dealt. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes people don't, they just don't. They just lay down and they give up, and they don't see the forest for the trees. And I think that you're a great example of resilience in that, regardless of the circumstances, that you can be blessed and you can bless others through your experience, and that you can use what you have not just gone through, but like what you experience regularly as not something that limits you, but it's something that can build other people up. And I think, man, not just a testimony, but what an example of resilience that we don't see often, especially in our culture today. And
yeah, like you said, when things get tough, people just want to lay down and quit.
Yeah, man.
When knowing that just the other side of that tough, or just the other side of that, whatever hard, is what you're striving to go for.
Right.
And yeah, it's just been, I've been blessed, and like I don't regret the life I've lived. I don't regret the IED going off because of where I am now. And through a lot of the people that I've encountered and the stories, the wisdom, the nuggets, the good, the bad, all of that stuff has helped me grow into who I am, and it's just, and understanding Marines don't quit. And that's what helped me fight on. That's what kept me alive is my brothers in Iraq.
Yeah.
Like here I am laying in a hospital bed, which I hated it at the moment, but, as best as they could, they were trying to stay in touch with me. I was still getting phone calls from them. Like I felt like I would be a disservice to them if I just laid over here and quit.
Yeah.
If I gave up. And but yeah, like I just wanted to live a normal life. Like I if it's just waking up with a smile on my face, or if it's going to go climb a rock wall, if it's going to go whatever it is, like I just want it to be normal.
Mm-hmm.
And that being normal, people started to notice, and they're like started to see that stuff. And if I can just get one person to look at life in a different direction, put a smile on their face, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And and it's just, I think I got a lot more gratitude when I went to San Antonio. Like the burn center was there, so going through the Center for the Intrepid, like I'm in therapy with a lot of guys that are burned 50, 60, 70% of their body. One of them was burned up to 90-some%.
Man.
So many reasons to just give up and quit. So many reasons to give attitude and be mad at the world. But these guys, you would never see it. Like one other story, like I just got to San Antonio. We were going to the chow hall for lunch, and he was burned so bad that he couldn't even open his Gatorade bottle. And he'd look at me and he says, "Matt, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you stay so motivated and positive, because I'd much rather be burned than blind." And I'm like, wow, like this guy's going to be going scar tissue surgeries for the rest of his life, but he's comfortable with who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at that and I'm like, wow, like I might have lost my legs, I might have lost my eyesight, but wow, there's people that have it so much worse than I do.
Yeah.
And when I stood up on my prosthetics for the first time, he was there cheering me on as loud as he possibly could. It's just, one of the times I was rolling through therapy, I was in a wheelchair and I was going to the mat. My legs were there, and I'd stand up, put them on, walk out. And my physical therapist stopped me one day and says, "Matt, you don't see this, but every day when you roll into therapy, you put your legs on, you stand up, and you walk out. You have a smile on your face, you're joking, you're laughing and giving people a hard time, and therapists throwing balls at you, you're tackling, just living life.
Yeah.
You come into work every day, and he's like, you got these young amputees over here who are probably trying to figure out their own life, wondering what's next, if they'll ever walk again, and they see a blind guy with no legs do it, and it gives them that hope.
Yeah.
It encourages them that if he could do it, then I could do it. And one of the things that we taught in the Marine Corps is lead by example, and that's one of the things that helped me understand that you don't have to be a loud leader. As long as you just get up and do what you need to do every day, people will follow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's all about, kind of just knowing what you need to do today, because you don't realize the impact that you're having on other people.
Right. Man, we talk about that a lot. We talk about, at the office, when I see things slipping, I actually learned this from Jocko, at least in principle, but, in the Marine Corps, like you had mentioned, it's all about like, if you want your team to do well, you lead from the front. Mm-hmm. And anytime that my business is performing well, my marriage life is good, things are going well in life, it's because I'm being disciplined in what I need to do. And people are watching, and we talk about this too, like on social media is an example. It's such a great tool because even though people might not react or comment or whatever, they're watching you. Mm-hmm. And if you're disciplined in what you're doing and you're providing value to people, you are helping someone, and people are seeing your story and they're seeing that resilience, and it's helping them, whether or not you ever hear about it,
That was and I always share this because one of the stories happened. We were coming back from Nashville in 2018, I think, and it was at a Toby Keith event. And I made the social media post and just like, wow, like here I am growing up in Winchester and all that happened in the military, the injuries and all this stuff, and just ultimate gratitude. And so a few days later, I get this email from this lady that I don't even know how she got my personal email. And she says, Matt, if it wasn't for me, or she says, Matt, I'm a huge Toby Keith fan. And I read your post and I Googled your name. And if it wasn't for me Googling your name to see how you live your life, then I'd have committed suicide.
Oh, man.
And it's like just, and I emailed back and forth with her to kind of, just, hey, thanks, back and forth conversations. But never met the lady, didn't even know who the lady was, but just out of the blue to get those emails. And, another story was actually from the Jocko podcast. He was overweight. He was dealing with cancer, and just kind of like down in the dumps. Just wanted, he's like, just can't do this no more. And I want to say I think he was a first responder or something like that. But he said once he heard, and I'll get to this in a minute, but once he heard the Just Walk about just putting one foot in front of the next, he's like, I bought the shirt. I got the shirt, and I got out of the bed, and I went from the bed to the bathroom, the bed to the kitchen, the bed to the front porch. Next thing you know, I'm walking around the block and losing all this weight, and went to the hospital for a checkup, cancer-free. And he's like, you know what, Matt, I'm just not today, Satan. These demons are not going to defeat me. And going through that Just Walk is like, and this Jocko came up with this one, which thank him for it. But we were same thing with therapy. Like I learned a lot from Matt. Matt Parker was my physical therapist, wasn't a veteran, but he was one of those guys that he could see the frustration, he could see the emotions on my face, and when it was one of those days, he says, let's go to the coffee shop. Let's just sit down and talk. You're not doing this today. You don't feel like you're going to want to do this today, and he was that kind of person. And, learning how to walk, I didn't think, prosthetics would be very difficult. I was tripping over my own feet, not wanting to fall. I was bouncing off the walls, and I'm like, just getting mad. And but I guess if you can't see it, I guess it makes prosthetics a little bit difficult to walk. But
I can imagine.
He stopped me and he was like, Matt, whatever you do, just put one foot in front of the next and just walk. I'll never let you fall. Just getting that confidence, that trust, finding those people I can trust in my life and realizing that, that's how we live life today. I almost lost my life on one wrong step. Wasn't guaranteed that next step. Like today, what can we learn in this moment right now? Because we're not guaranteed the next hour, the next day, the next week, but we are guaranteed what we are right now. One of my favorite quotes is, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one simple step. And it's just comparing each step to each day in life. And that's, I read this in an article probably about 10 years ago, and that's where I came up with this. One of my favorite Bible verses is Matthew 6:34. I don't memorize because I don't want to be that person behind a podium and forget a Bible verse, and I feel like a true idiot.
We do a Bible study podcast, and I'm terrible at memorizing Bible verses. It's rough.
But that verse was just, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow's got so much to worry about.
Yeah.
Just focus on right now in this moment. And all of that, that just walk mentality, just putting one foot in front of the next. Like, man, this might not be the right step, but as long as I'm stepping forward, then I'm going in the right direction. And that's just how I want to live life. Like I want to live in the present, strengthen my mind and my body for that next step. Yes, the past is always going to be there, and you could learn from those lessons in the past, but you can't live in the past. And what happened to me, but I'm not there anymore. I'm where I am right now. So,
and you mentioned, something that I wanted to ask you about directly, which we had talked about before, but, you brought up your favorite Bible verse, and, on this particular show, we have our Bible study episodes that we do, and I try to bring faith into everything, because I think that it is the foundation, one, of who I am, and I think from a listener's perspective, a lot of our listeners are faithful, and in your particular case, it could be very easy to be angry at God and to blame him for obviously what happened, but you've chosen not to do that. And I'm interested to hear like how has faith played a role in not just the journey, but like where you're at right now in life. Because look, I mean, you and I just met in person. I'm the outside looking in, but looks like you live a great life. You've got a healthy family, a good wife, and you are serving other people well. And at least from my perspective, I see God blessing you in what you're doing here. And so what has that looked like, over the years? How has your faith kind of shaped where you are today?
So one of the questions that was brought up in my Bible study group probably a year ago was God waiting on you or are you waiting on God? And I'm like, that just hit home to me because all my life, the only time I went to church was with my grandma because she made us. Or recruit training because the drill instructors weren't in church.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody had to go to church there.
That was your freedom.
Yeah.
And but just ringing a bell, that just rang a bell because here I'm thinking, God has walked this path with me all along. And looking back, like even the close calls in Iraq, if I didn't look down at that ID and see those command wires and the shrapnel would have went through my throat, I wouldn't be here today. Wow. So maybe going through my eyes is a blessing. Provided me with all those individuals when I was in those dark spots. He's always been walking right beside me. Revelation 3:20, he's going to knock at the door until you finally open it, and he's going to come in and have dinner with you. He's there. It was on me to finally open the door and let him in. And a lot of times he's had to carry me along this journey. A majority of the time he had to carry me along this journey because I couldn't do this alone. Kind of looking back at life and just, I have been so blessed, and I've made a lot of mistakes, as we've all done. I just finished reading the book about the ragamuffin gospel.
I heard about that.
We're all ragamuffins in this world because we're all sinners, and God still loves us. And last year, I was in a dark spot, and the Bible study leader and two of my friends, they were like, hey, why don't you come have lunch with us? Out of the blue. I'm like, wow, sure, and we go down the road to Chick-fil-A, and we're sitting there, it's like, hey, why don't you come back to our Bible study, because I went a couple of years ago, then life got in the way, and I couldn't go back, and I'm like, oh, you're still holding it. Yeah, I'd love to go there, and I think that was on a Monday, and then Tuesday, I'm there at Peacemakers is what we call it, and I've been every Tuesday, if I'm in town, since then. And I love the song by Alabama, Angels Among Us. These three guys were angels among us. They were there. They showed up for me in my darkest moments. And, you talk about brotherhood and camaraderie in the Marine Corps. I told my wife probably a couple months ago or whatever, but I never thought I would find that type of camaraderie or brotherhood, but I have with my Bible study group. A lot of them are 60s and 70s. It's those wise leaders, and a lot of them law enforcement and military. But, I've always gravitated towards people older than me because that's where you get true wisdom. I got it from my grandpa. I got it from my dad. And sadly, they're not here with me no more. But I look at these individuals as my father. It's that prodigal son coming back home. And that's just, I got baptized in September 16th.
Congratulations, man. Yeah, I see the certificate behind you.
Yeah, so just, and actually the pastor that, he baptized me, he read the prodigal son verse, Luke 15, and it's just, but, having all these, even, going back in that dark spot with those three, I realized, social media, like you said, it could be a blessing or it could be a curse. Sometimes I use it as a curse. A lot of times I use it as a curse. And I realized then that I need to get myself off that. I need to find out who I am. I need to find out the life I want to live. Even though at the time I was 38 years old, I'm always thinking about what's next. What can I do next? I don't want to live in a boring life. I want to do stuff. I want to be there for people. So I got off 3 social media platforms, and I had this other app on my phone called the Bible app. And I started clicking that thing open every day. I think right now I'm on 672 days in a row.
Wow.
of getting the daily devotion every morning, the Bible plans, and not only that with Peacemakers, and then I got a friend that lives in the neighborhood, and we've started like our little coffee group on Friday mornings. But it's just every morning when I wake up, I come right in here in this study, and I just have my cup of coffee before I have to wake my daughter up for school. I just reflect on life. What am I grateful for? It could be as small as that cup of coffee to the birds chirping outside. It could be that like yesterday was my alive day. The corpsman that put the tourniquets on my legs to save my life, my wife, my kids. Man, it's like, why not be blessed? Like, it's all around me. The blessings are right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I try to look way over the blessings, but with really the life I want to live, and the blessings are directly in front of me. And even me, it took a long time for me to realize that.
Yeah.
And but like reading starting reading the Bible. At first, I was lost. I've read it more and more every day, and I'm starting to figure it out a little bit more, which we're never going to figure it all out.
Yeah.
But then I've always wanted to go back to school. And I did graduate from the University of Kentucky with a history and a media arts degree. And I didn't know if that's what I wanted to go to school for, but I also started looking down the road at Asbury, the seminary. And I went back to those early days of my recovery. Like, I've always wanted to walk in those hospital rooms and be with those individuals who are struggling. And even though I've been kind of doing that the last almost 19 years, but why not continue not only to learn more about myself, more about purpose, more about life, more about God and the Bible and all this stuff, but gain those tools and that knowledge and that wisdom to when I walk into a room, and it's not only let my imputations say, hey, I've been there, I've done that, you could do this, you could overcome this,
Mm-hmm.
but it's to sit down and just have those conversations. Like we just shared, like, been in many situations where people will walk up and say, I almost want to, this morning I woke up thinking about putting a gun in my mouth, or I want to kill myself, or, I never thought that I would get those kind of conversations when I wanted to join the Marine Corps. But I realized that this is it's a dirty job.
Yeah.
You're going to face with those kind of conversations, and if you can't handle it, then back away and don't do it. But I'm a brother's first kind of person, and I want to be there for my brother, no matter if I know them or not. But I don't like the suicide number, and I realize that the only way that we can get the suicide numbers down is if me and you focus on our own circle, and we take care and we check in on them. One of the organization I work for is make a call, take a call, and have those honest conversations. Like, you could throw money at it all you want in Frankfurt or Washington, D.C., but to me, it's that grassroots level.
For sure.
It's not me focusing on your friends, but it's me focusing on my phone list. And I picked this up in COVID. Hey, I'm going to go down through my phone list and call 5 people, or text them or whatever. And, hey, they might not be struggling, but, hey, just hearing their voice would be good for you as well. And that's what it's all about. That's how we get the numbers down, is we just check in on our own.
Yeah.
Like, quit worrying about, looking well beyond the trees, as you said, and look right here in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, it's impacted me as a veteran. There's been a lot of guys that I was in with that have committed suicide. And even when I was in, man, I remember there were multiple instances where Marines were trying to kill themselves at the barracks. I had a dude, I was on duty one night, and I was a fresh corporal. And it was like my very first night as duty as a corporal, and some Marine came out, and he was like, he had his like blanket in his hand, like a sheet, not a blanket, but like his bed sheet. And he sat down in our little, duty hut, and he's watching TV, but he was acting super weird, man. I was like, hey, you good? And he was like, yeah, no, I'm good. And then he walked out to the catwalk and tied his bed sheet on the rail, and he was like, this is it. Like, he was going to try to hang himself. And so I had to, like, get him corralled. And so it's unfortunately part of the I don't know. I think it's part of the experience for a lot of guys who were in, man. I mean, combat or not, it's like pretty rampant in our society, especially military society. And you're right. I think that checking in on your own, and like we had talked about earlier, we keep in contact with guys we were in with. And thankfully, it's been since 2018 or 2019 was the last time we lost a guy, and we haven't lost any since. There was a period of years there where it seemed like it was happening every year.
Yeah, that was the Ayala, the guy that I mentioned earlier. he was having some hard times about 3 or 4 years ago, and I told him, I'm like, look, every Tuesday, I want you to call me at this time, because he lives in California.
Yeah.
And, we talked every Tuesday, and he's in a good spot right now. It's hard because, like, when people talk about suicide, they think about, they're depressed.
Mm-hmm.
Or one of the guys that really inspired me when I was going through, wanting to re-enlist, he was burned overseas, I think burned in Iraq. And then he re-enlisted, redeployed, came home, got married, got out of the Marine Corps, moved to Houston. He got me into fly fishing, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Really good leader, good person, very positive. And he called me maybe like a week and a half before Thanksgiving of, I think, 2014. And I let it go to voicemail, selfishly, never called him back. And I found out the day after Thanksgiving that he took his life. Had a bad appointment at the VA. Stepkids found him. And it kills me when you talk about, the whole take a call, because I was so selfish that day that why didn't I just pick up the call to call him back? Like, it might have been just been, hey, Matt, how you doing? Or, hey, Matt, I'm struggling. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't know until I see him in heaven.
Yeah.
And it shows you that you're not always down in the dumps. You're not the depressed. It could be that he was one of the most positive people I've had in my life. And he let whatever that appointment was, whatever he heard that day, just take it to, and
Yeah.
then one of the guys that served with me in Iraq, and when I say he had my six, he literally was behind me on every patrol. We went to Montana in 2021 and fly fishing, and he lived in backwoods of West Virginia. He came home, went back home, and I think he had like a seizure on a four-wheeler. And went to the hospital because he almost died doing that. They got hooked on pain pills. But he went out to Montana on this fly fishing trip and had the time of his life. And then at the end of July, I get a text from him. He's like, hey, I'm going on this fishing trip to Texas. I'm looking forward to this. I love you, Matt. I found out the day of the withdrawal, Kabul stuff in 2021 that, and I was getting my daughter ready for school, and I looked down at my watch and it says, hey, did you hear about? And that's all it was on the watch.
Yeah.
So I rolled in there and got my phone, and it said, hey, did you hear about Arthur? Killed himself in a hotel room. And I'm like, man, like just 2 months ago, like he was in such a good spot, and it's just, it's like that day I remember my wife had a work meeting. She went out that night and says, and after finding out about him and then the 11 Marines, the one soldier, and the corpsmen that were killed in Afghanistan, like it's a lot, and it's like the Marine Corps. I remember on Facebook, the black stripe went across the EGA, and she was like, she knew that, I'm not gonna lie, like I was gonna go to the back porch, I was gonna listen to music, I was gonna have some cocktails, and I was gonna get emotional. I don't cry in front of her, I don't like to, but she knew, and she texted to me, and it just, at a point in your life, you kind of grow numb to a lot of this stuff, but it's still like, you get a text in the middle of the night, or whenever you get a text throughout the day, like you're like, oh gosh, like what is that going to be?
Yeah.
And it's just, my friend always talks about it. It's like, you could watch a football game and you could sit there and watch the other team and you could plan out and strategize and their schemes and all this stuff on how to defeat that team. But here we are, we can't figure out how to just take care of our brothers and take care of our own people, and it's just, I just feel like if I do my part by just communicating, staying in touch every day, and then at least that's good. And I just hope that they're strong enough to where like, hey, Matt, I need help. Because I know the resources, but I just need them to call, to text, to message me on social media, like whatever it is. Just I could get them in the right direction. But it's like they just need to reach out.
Yeah, it's like you can only do what you can do. I had a very similar story with a buddy of mine who took his life in California. Actually, he and I had just talked, and I have a business, had a business. I technically still own it, but I don't run it. It's called Sergeant Junket. And this is a junk removal company. They do demolition and junk removal, that kind of thing. And he was in California, and irrigation is a big need out there. And I had just talked to him. He's like, yeah, dude, I'm going to start my sprinkler company. I'm going to call it Sergeant Sprinkler. And I was like, you messing with me right now? Are you really going to do that? He's like, no, for real. I'm going to name it after your business. And then 2 weeks later, I found out he took his life. And he had tried to call me, and I didn't answer because I was working or something, and I told myself I'd call him back and never did. And it took me a while to get over that. But you know, to your point, I think it's one of those things where it's like we can do what we can do, and I mean, I carried a little bit of guilt about that for a long time, but we have to, if we are constantly checking in and we are doing our due diligence, at some point, you know, it's got to come down to the person being willing to reach out. But yeah, man, I mean, and there's a million resources now, you know, and if you are listening to this, by the way, and you are struggling with this, reach out to someone. I mean, reach out to us. We'd be happy to have that conversation. Hopefully no one listening is, but I know that it's way more prevalent than people think, and it's just under the surface a lot of times.
That's what, like, every time when I talk, like, it could be a small group or a large group, like, you know someone in that room is having a bad morning, a bad day, or struggling with something.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just trying to get that one person. You know, that's all it is, just one person to find help, to seek out the chaplain, the pastor, the therapist, the counselor. Because I'm not going to lie, like, I don't open up very much. Not very,
same.
You know, and you know, before 2 years ago, like, I didn't want to talk to a counselor. Like, I didn't want to be that person. And I will say, like, going back to, and this has affected me, and it's like things I'm trying to work through, but, you know, when I finally got in that direction in 2007, like, here I am, positive, moving in the right direction, because this is what I want to do. You know, I kind of got put into that place where now I'm on a platform, like when the Center for the Intrepid opened January of 2007, and so a lot of politicians, a lot of generals, a lot of admirals, whoever would come in there, and they're like, well, here's this blind WMT Marine. They come to, you know, and it's just like one after the next. All I was focused on was just living life. I'm not out there trying to make some kind of, like, you know, a celebrity of myself. Like, I just want to live life, and if people are inspired and encouraged, and let's go, let's do this together. Right. But, you know, and you start moving that direction, you start getting the people, and then social media, I could put on there about, I'm doing this today, and it's like, oh, you're doing such a great job, such a good job, and all this stuff, and then I realized probably before COVID, I was like, at this place, I'm like, who do I go to? You get all these people that look at me for this motivation. Like, oh, if Matt's going, I'll wake up every morning and see what Matt's doing today, and it just motivates me, inspires me, whatever. Like, who do I go to when I'm having those bad days? You know, and it's just, like, that bothered me, that pressure, you know, and it's like, I felt this when I was in seminary this last October, and it was right after, like, you know, you couldn't drop a class, and I was just, it's not like I was having bad grades. I just felt like there's just some tools that were set up for me, and I could just see myself just failing this class. And I was just going all different directions. I was telling Amanda, I was like, I'm going to fail. I'm going to quit. Like, I just want to quit. I just want to give up. And I didn't even go to my afternoon class because I was going in so many different directions. And Amanda told me, because she knows I'm not a quitter. And quitting bothers me so much. And she's like, I thought you were one of those people who never quit. And, like, that just stuck with me. You know, it's like, here I am going in so many different directions, going at her, unfair to her. And she says that to me. And I just thought of that, and I'm like, you know, I realized then, because I actually looked up, I think it's Matthew chapter 11. Hey, all this stuff, why put the pressure on myself? Let God handle that. Let me just focus on here and now what I need to focus on. God will work it out in the end. You know, I'm not a quitter. Quitting to me, like, I go back to the Baton Death March in 2009, and I was proud of this because to me it's like putting my foot in my mouth on this. Like, I didn't want to do this, but I, you know, ran my mouth a year earlier to my physical therapist, and he remembered. So I get back from the Blind Rehab Center January of 2009, and they're like, oh, hey, Matt, I signed you up for the Baton Death March. It's at the last Sunday in March. I'm like, wow, so I got like 8 weeks to prepare for walking 14 miles in the desert.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful, you know. But I told my physical therapist that I walked it with, and I was like, look, when I finish this, I'm going to put my medical board in, and I'm going to go for it. But I went out there and I walked 10 miles in 8 hours, 10 of the 14. And at that time, I was proud of it. But then looking back, I'm like, wow, 4 miles? I couldn't finish that? Like, and it wasn't the prosthetics that slowed me down. It was these like little nagging injuries. And I'm like, of course, everybody's like, oh, well, you got the perfect excuse. You got the perfect, reason to, give it up or whatever, quit. And I'm like, no, like these aren't going to be an excuse for me. And those last 4 miles stuck with me for the next 10 years until I finally walked all 14 miles. And it's like understanding that if we put our mind to it, like we could do whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, to me, like quitting, like pain is temporary, but quitting is permanent. And for me, quitting sticks with me. And Amanda knew that October day. Like, she knows I don't want to quit because that would just nag at me and bother me.
Mm-hmm.
And,
she didn't want to hear it.
Yeah, exactly. That too. But it's like, why put the pressure on myself?
Yeah.
Let God handle that. Like, you just focus on what you need to focus on. Look, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't work out, then it's not going to work out. Maybe it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? Once I got, started moving in that direction, the rest of the semester went pretty smoothly. Like, I still complained a few times here and there. We're all human.
Well, if you ain't complaining, you ain't training, maybe,
Exactly.
So, yeah. No, that's good. It's good to have a wife in your corner like that. And I think you're right. I mean, I saw something the other day. I thought it was corny at first, but it's true. And it's like, if you feel like you're drowning, I know a guy that walks on water.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think that it's learning how to release that control and let him handle what he needs to handle, and then you stay focused on the path and do what you need to do. And when you do that, it's almost like you're relinquishing control, but you're more in control because you're giving it to the person who designed things in a particular order for a reason. So
the one thing I love about her and a lot of the people that's in my life, that tough love mentality,
mm-hmm.
And I think that was tough love. Like, it had to be said, and understanding that's how I feel about quitting. Like, it hit me hard, and it made me really look at it and just think, like, what am I doing here? And I think it's life, There's going to be a lot of times in life where we just want to quit, but it's like, like I said earlier, understand that on the other side of that thought is where true happiness and joy and success can go. It's just, that next step.
Yeah, it's the same way, in our business and everything. It's like, just when I really get overwhelmed and I think, man, I can't, this is too much. I'm going to just cash it in and go back to work somewhere. But you find that extra gear. My wife, especially, like that tough love, like, hey, like, shut up and quit whining. This is what you need to do. I think Marines operate well in that way. Like, they just need to hear it directly sometimes. But when she's done that and I've pushed through, it's like the next level that I've been trying to get to is right on the other side of that portion where I really wanted to quit,
Yeah.
Is there anything else in particular that you wanted to share on the show that you wanted to get out there that we didn't cover maybe?
I just think about, as we've covered a lot of it, but just about life, the choice on the life that we want to live, it's in our hands. You could choose, to lay down and live life easily, or you could choose the life, to go out and inspire and motivate others. I think the most important thing with life is, like I mentioned earlier, you don't know that impact you have on others. I don't understand how people can wake up in the world and just be mad.
Yeah.
Like, if it's always told, if it's out of my hands, it's out of my control. Why focus on that? Why get stressed out about that? Just live life. And, I take a lot of, I think the gratitude of just, being blessed with this life, my wife, my kids, and this family, and I'm happy. I think I wake up every morning when I do my reflection, it's like I read my Bible verses and my scriptures, and it's just, it puts me in the right spot, and I think all of us should sometimes just unwind and take ourselves away from the stressfulness of life and just open up the Bible, read it, and it's just, it's worked miracles for me to understand that no matter where we're at in life, no matter what you're struggling, like, God is always with you. Open that door and let him in. And, it's just, I always look back to my life, January 18, 2007, not the direction I wanted to go. I don't think any third grader in school writes, hey, I want to be a double amputee blind guy. But you know what? I don't regret a single minute of it. The good, the bad, the ups and downs, because it all led me to who I am today and where I am today. Beautiful wife, an amazing family, and I always like sharing the story because I think it says it a lot. Somebody asked me one day, what do I do when I'm in those down when I'm in the dark spots. And I told them then that I'm either going to roll in my wheelchair or walk down the hallway to my daughter's room, and I'm going to get on the floor and play Barbies with her. Because it puts me in the right spot, the life I want to live. Like, there's never going to be a day that I'm never going to be in my daughter's life, my family's life. So when suicide pops in my head, I go in her room.
Yeah.
When those bad days of wanting to quit and give up, it's that tough love from my wife. One of the times I spoke, first time my daughter ever heard me talk about those dark days of wanting to give up and wanting to quit and not live this life, and I didn't realize it, but she was in my wife's eyes, or arms, crying. And I sat down and she says, "Daddy, you chose right." I'm like, "Chose right? What are you talking about?" She's like, "You chose to live." And then later that night, as I'm getting ready to put her in bed, she says, "Daddy," I'm like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "I'm trying to Google ways so you can see my beautiful face." You know what? At the end of the day, that insurgent that pushed that button, that took so much from me one day, gave me all of this. You know, all the life lessons in life. He gave me life. You know, and I forgive him for that. And it was brought up in my seminary class, and I've been thinking about this a lot. It's like I could go throughout this life hating him, wanting to do the same things that he did to me, but what is that going to give me? Is it going to give my legs back? Is it going to give me eyesight? No. I can tell you one thing, I'm probably living a better life today than he is. And I'm blessed. And I thank you all for driving down and doing this podcast. And any way I could help out, you know, in the future, I'd love to be on again. Whatever I can do to help out. And I think the most important thought, I cherish our conversations and this friendship that we just, you know, started, and I hope it grows. Yeah,
absolutely, brother. I'm definitely looking forward to having you on again. I appreciate you, man. I just appreciate the realness of the conversation. You know, I gathered that from you before we met, and it's invaluable, man. Like, a lot of guys don't want to talk about things, and you've opened up and shared your story, and that's invaluable. And it's been great just getting to know you a little bit here, man. So,
well, thank you.
For anybody listening, Matthew Bradford, go check him out on. I know you deleted some social media, so I don't want to send him the wrong place. But I'm assuming Facebook and Instagram.
Oh no, I'm on them now, but
okay.
Like on Facebook, you know, I got my personal, but also got my public account, which is No Legs, No Vision, No Problem.
Okay.
And then my Instagram, M_Bradford_USMC, and I would give you the email for my public speaking, but we've kind of had issues with our website, so if you just reach out to me on one of those two, and I'm sure you could find my email. I mean, that lady a few years back found my email. My life's out there. So
yeah, and you can find him there on Facebook. You'll see him. And then if you have any questions that you would like us to ask him, maybe you can't find his email, just send them into questions@bydesignshow.com. We appreciate you listening. If there's anything you got out of this, which if you listened to this and you didn't, go to the doctor and get your head checked. But please share the show. We're growing this thing organically. We're not running ads. We greatly appreciate you sharing the show for us. Matthew, thank you so much. We will see you guys on the next episode.
Yeah. There's a war going on inside. Just to name a couple, I battle with porn and pride. In a persistent struggle, a reoccurring huddle. A prayer meeting with me and the Holy Spirit. Feeling free, but no, I'm nowhere near it. But thank God for his conviction. The awkward part of me that may leave others to suspicion and call me into question. I confess my addiction. Know it's a lethal weapon. May compromise the mission. Being proselytized from this humanistic system. You think about that until